Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Woolly Wonka Fibers podcast. My name is Anne. Today is Sunday, March 4th, 2018. I hope everybody is doing great. If you are a new viewer, welcome. Thank you for taking the time to check me out. If you're a returning viewer subscriber, thank you so much for choosing to come back and spending some time with me. I greatly appreciate all of your likes and subscriptions and comments. So thank you all. Today's podcast will be a little bit truncated, mostly because I don't have a lot of knitting to share with you. If you've been following my podcast at all, you know that last weekend I was in Santa Clara, California for the Stitches West 2018 show. Thank you to everybody who came out, stopped by the booth and said hello, purchased items, brought some finished things to show me, which that was a ton of fun. Stitches West, if you have not been to a Stitches event, is crazy. There's just no other word for it. And I'm also a little croaky today because I managed to get the cold or virus or whatever's been going around the country. So I stumbled home on Monday and went to bed for 2 days. And I think I've mostly kicked it, but you can kind of still hear I'm a little coughy, snuffly. So please excuse that portion of the recording. So let's see. I flew into Santa Clara on Wednesday night. A little bit of nail biting because my plane was delayed getting out of Albuquerque, and then the flight out of San Diego was also delayed. So I got in later than I had expected, but at least got in Wednesday night. Went straight to bed, got up the next morning, and was at the San Jose Conference Center by 8 o'clock to start setting up. I shipped all of my product, so I shipped yarn to California, and as I mentioned in my last video, the yarn guys, Dennis and Jeffrey, also vend at that particular venue, and so they were super, super kind to me and brought the tall grid wall type panels that we both use for display, but they loaned me a set so I didn't have to rent them and I didn't have to ship them, which was incredibly gracious and extremely wonderful of them. And they brought two of their shop workers with them, and I'm gonna go out on a limb and say neither Lance nor Scott watches my videos, but if you do, guys, thank you all so much for helping me with the setup and teardown of those panels, especially on Sunday when I wasn't feeling great. That made a huge, huge difference. And then also I wanted to say a big thank you to Vivian, who is a native of the area. So she was able to come in on Thursday morning and help me hang yarn. She came back throughout the weekend, was there to help, manage some traffic and help me get people checked out and answer questions. And then she helped me pack again on Sunday afternoon. Excuse me. Such a huge help. There was a point in time, I think it was Friday. The days kind of all blur into one long craziness. There were so many people in the booth that literally, like, I couldn't walk 2 steps to go pick up a pattern that was on the table at the opposite end of the table from where I was standing for a customer who wanted a copy. So it's overwhelming for both the vendors as well as for those of you who come to shop. I think there's a couple hundred vendors total, so it's a huge open area. It gets very noisy. There's, like I said, lots of people. I appreciate, again, everybody's patience. If you had a specific question, I did try to get to everybody as quickly and efficiently as I could. But sometimes just, if there's 15 people standing in a 10 by 10 booth, you can only do what you can do. And there's only one of me, and even having awesome help, there's still only one of me. So thank you for being patient if you came by the booth and it was busy. I know I didn't get a chance to maybe talk quite as much with some folks as I would have liked or they would have liked, but Friday and Saturday were just slammed, which is great. I mean, that's the reason I go. I take yarn to sell to people, and so it's lovely to have people who come and want to purchase it. So again, thank you to everybody who helped me out, who came by the booth, who supported Willy Wonka. Yeah, all 2 thumbs up. I appreciated all of you. So even though I took some things along to work on in the booth for those quiet times, which apparently never came, I didn't really get very much accomplished. I did knit some on the way out on a secret knitting project for the Spring Filament magazine, but the way back, I just felt so awful. I got a window seat on my Southwest flights, and I curled up and shut the window blind, and I basically slept the whole way home on those 2 legs. So all of my focused knitting time really didn't happen because I didn't have really time to do much knitting. I will show you, however, where I am on some things, and we'll talk about some plans going forward. And if you've made it 7 minutes in with me yammering about Stitches West, there'll be some books at the end. Stick with me. Upcoming in about a month, 5 weeks I think it is Interweaves Yarn Fest. I will be vending at that. That is in Loveland, Colorado, the weekend of the 11th and 12th of April. So I will be there for that. That is my next big show. Okay, so things I'm working on. These are the Winter Rose Socks by Helen Stewart. Again, the yarn is my Rhiannon sock in the colorway Heartbreaker, which is a pink speckle dye. You can see I got almost nothing done on these. I worked on the legs some, and this is where these are living right now. So they obviously did not get finished for February and the Willy Wonka Palooza prompt of pink, but I will try to power through them in March and get myself caught up. So this is still sock 1, pretty little lace pattern, not very hard or difficult to knit. I think they're going to be very sweet when they're finished, but got to get them there. Those I am working on out of my little Briar Rose bag. I love this sort of William Morris feel fabric. Just a little bag I made myself, but kind of has like the Tudor rose on it. I like that. And the thorns. All right. For the March prompt in the Willy Wonka Palooza, the 2 prompts are either work with something that's green or cables. And I am just going to work on a very simple hat. Let me see if I can fold this to not share the instructions. I've actually knit this hat before, but I love it. It is called Hoarfrost. It's a very simple ribbed slouchy hat. The designer is Eve Mehi, I think is how she says her last name. But anyway, the pattern is Hoarfrost. I'll link to it down below. And I'm going to knit it in Sea Dragon, which is a speckle dye. This is my Aislinn DK, and it's kind of got like a seafoam green base and then specks of green, orange, and bright blue throughout. So gonna make one of those. Like I said, I had knit this pattern before and worked it out of hand spun, but it's a great just all around basic slouchy kind of shape. So I feel you never can really have too many of those. So I will be working on that over the course of the month. I'm also currently in the midst of spinning up my hand-carded Funky Carolina Blueface Leicester Sparkle Bats in the colorway Iris. I am pretty close. I think I have maybe half an ounce left of the first 2 ounces spun into singles. My hope is to finish that up before the next time I talk to you guys, mid-March. And that is definitely a green colorway that will translate for the Wonkapalooza. And now onto books. There was a heavy sigh from the other room. Someone had a big walk this morning and now she's having doggy sleeps. I have 3 books to share with you guys. The first one is called The Prince of Mist, and I read this for the Gothic novel prompt from the Around the World in 52 Books challenge on Goodreads. This is a book by Carlos Ruiz Zafron, who wrote The Shadow of the Wind, that I read as kind of my last book at the end of 2017. Really liked the author's writing, thought I would give this one a shot. I did not like this book as much as Shadow of the Wind. It's a little more young adult in feel, some similar themes. There's a young man who his father and mother decide that they're going to take the children, there's 3 of them, and leave Barcelona to live on the seacoast during World War II. His father's a watchmaker, and the young man, whose name is Max, adores his father, but also realizes that his father has some failings. So they go to this little seaside town, and they are renting a house that was built by a rich entrepreneur and his wife, and there's been a tragedy. Their son, they have died, and their son has died. They tried very hard to have a child for many years. They finally have a son, and these tragedies happen that the family is basically wiped out. So Max's family is now renting this house. And one night Max looks out and he realizes that there's like figures in the mist outside the sort of enclosure that's the family's yard. And he goes out in the night and he finds this creepy graveyard full of these stone statues of what look like circus performers who are frozen. And then some weird things start happening in the house. There's odd noises, and his youngest sister suffers a fall down the stairs. And so there's all this like creepy gothic stuff going on. The subplot characters who come into this are a young man and his grandfather, who's the lighthouse keeper for this little inlet that this town is on. And they also have a backstory that's tied into the tragedy of the family. It was entertaining. It was a fun book to read. It was definitely spooky. It was the kind of thing that you would, read kind of with the lights off and a flashlight under your covers. I just wasn't as engaged with it, and maybe it's because the characters stayed children throughout the book. In the Shadow of the Wind, the young man becomes a young adult, and the story arc is greater because of that. So fun and entertaining, and lots of creepiness. Not a lot of like violence or slasher kind of stuff, but it is definitely in the Gothic tradition. So if you like that kind of thing, the writing is good. It's entertaining. Like I said, it's a pretty quick read. I think it's about 215 pages. So that might be up your alley. The next book I read was for the theme, an own voices book, meaning the author of the book is part of we'll call it disenfranchised type population, or um, non-mainstream population, and they have undergone experiences that match those of at least a character in the book. And so the book that I just finished was called It's Kind of a Funny Story, and I believe that this has been made into a movie or is being made into a movie. It's not on my radar, so I actually didn't realize that until I had downloaded the Kindle book and looked at the cover and realized that there were like actual photographs of actors portraying the characters in it on the front cover. So the book was written by a young man who himself suffered from a severe depression and had been hospitalized at a psychiatric facility in New York City. And that's the same as the main character, who's in high school and is under a lot of pressure that he's put on himself to succeed with this kind of high power high school that he's been accepted into. He's just killed himself to prepare and take the exam and do really great and get in. And then he realizes once he gets there that A, it's a lot of hard work, and B, he's no longer the smartest kid in his class, or the hardest working kid in his class. And so he puts a lot of this pressure on himself, and it feeds into his feelings of inadequacy and contributes to his severe depression. And the turning point in the book is that he decides he's going to kill himself. He's going to jump off the Brooklyn Bridge. And at the last minute, he calls a suicide hotline and they tell him, take yourself to the emergency room, which he does. And so he is admitted onto an adult ward. He's 15. Because of overcrowding in the hospital, he's actually in with the adults. And so he meets this whole group of people who wind up becoming his friends and becoming a support system of sorts for him. And he gets back on his meds and he works through his depression and is eventually discharged. So all of that information is very, very similar to the author's own history. Footnote to say that the author, after he wrote this book, and I think he had one other that he wrote, wound up committing suicide in his 20s. So kind of knowing that, there's a little what's the word I'm looking for? The book ends on a very happy note. The young man kind of gets his life together. You feel like he's moved beyond this dark point and things are going to go okay for him. But then knowing that the author himself experienced all of that, and while he had a temporary reprieve from things going badly, they ultimately went very badly for him. Makes it kind of a bittersweet sort of book. I can appreciate this book. I think it is written in a very balanced way. It doesn't make light of things, but it's not a downer of a book. I think it presents things in a fairly balanced way, in terms of the sort of constant up and down for folks who have a chemical depression and either aren't on the right medication or don't take their medication or whatever the scenario is. I don't like this kind of book. Maybe I'm shallow. Like I said, I can appreciate it. I read it. I thought it was a good portrait of this difficult period in this young man's life, and enjoyed the writing, but I don't know, just wasn't, the book didn't engage me as maybe it should have. I don't know. So mixed review on that one. And then the final book is a book that I read for the topic of an author's debut book. And I picked a book called The Gargoyle. The author's name is Andrew Davidson. Didn't know anything about him, just did a Goodreads search and found first books, basically a list, and picked this one. I'm not sure how to describe this book to you. It's a bit odd. Let's go with things I like and then things I didn't like. Things I liked. I liked the general premise is that the main character has suffered a horrible car accident in which he's been burned, badly burned. And he's somebody who's not very nice. He's not a nice person. You maybe wouldn't say he deserved it, but let's just say he had a lifestyle that was not conducive to slipping into old age gracefully. And the accident is brought about by bad choices that he's made. While he's in the burn unit, he has this visitor who the hospital staff say is somebody who is a psychiatric patient because she has all these fantastical stories, and she's an artist. But as the story evolves, she kind of seems almost more sane than most people. She is a stone cutter. She carves gargoyles and fantastical creatures out of stone. That's what she does. And so she comes to our main character while he's in the hospital, and she starts telling him these stories from the past. And you're not sure whether they are fiction, like part of her mental health issues, if she's telling a story that she's heard, if she's telling a story that she's read somewhere and she's kind of embellishing on it, or if she's telling the truth. You really don't know where all of this is. So, the things I liked. Her stories were wonderful. The character of Marianne, the sculptress, she's amazing. She's creative, she's interesting, she's engaging, she's someone who lives for her art. The descriptions of the fantastical creatures that she carves, and then all of these sort of Scheherazade type 1001 stories that she has are really, really interesting. And you want to hear more. That was great. That part of the book was wonderful. The stuff I didn't like. Okay, I get that this guy has been horribly burned. Some of you may know I worked in the medical industry for 20 years. I think I have a pretty calm stomach. Stuff doesn't tend to bother me, like graphic descriptions of injuries or things like that don't tend to bother me. When you listen to them for many years, you do kind of get not that it doesn't bother you, but like it doesn't make me feel ill. I'm not somebody who's squeamish. This book I thought was over the top in terms of some of the descriptions about the medical treatments, and being a burn victim is horrible. So I get it, and you don't need to write multiple chapters about that. You don't. We get it. This guy is horribly scarred. He's got burns over almost his entire body. He's lost appendages. He's in a lot of pain. He's already an addictive personality, so he's very interested in continuing that with his morphine just to get through the day. I get that. I did not need to be hit over the head with it. So if you are someone who is at all squeamish, you're not going to want to read this book. Just flat out say that. And it's done in kind of a very medically detailed sort of way. Leave it at that. I also had trouble because there was a couple of sort of subplot lines about the main character thinking he's going to commit suicide, deciding what he's going to do when he does finally get discharged. and they kind of like start the plot line. The author hinted towards some other stuff going on, and then like that plot line just disappears. It just like falls off a cliff. You don't hear about it again. And so when the end of the book comes and there is some redemption at the end of it, you kind of wonder, you feel like you're left hanging a little bit, you know, okay, so did he decide not to go down that path, or is he still going? I don't know. It's billed as a love story, which it is in some respects, between the main character and Marianne the sculptor. But it's certainly not an easy love story, and it's not really one with a happy ending. It's sort of a historical fiction, but it's got some other stuff in there. It's just an odd book, and I'm not sure how to describe it to y'all. So there were parts of it that were beautifully written. And again, like I said, I loved the stories that are in it. So again, this is another mixed bag kind of recommendation. I don't think I would recommend it to everybody. I think if you can get past the first third of it, which is where the bulk of the sort of not so nice bits is living, you can take away some kernels of interest and good writing. But I won't give it a 100% recommendation. We'll just say that. I'm finishing up a book now for, let's see, it's the 4 elements prompt for the water. It's called The Seduction of Water. So I'll let you guys know how I like that when I come back to talk to you next time. And on deck after that is a book about the Marsden art theft. I think I've read a fictitious book about the Marsden art theft, and this is more nonfiction. So I'll be interested to see if that actually matches up with what I remember inside my head. But that's on deck for the next go round. So like I said, kind of a weird and truncated podcast today, mostly about books, because that's kind of what I've been up to doing. Excuse me. I will plan to sorry. I will plan to talk with you guys in a couple of weeks. So until then, happy crafting, take care of yourself, and I will talk to you then. Bye.